These are 10 beer brands sold in British pubs that aren't what they appear to be. Some are fake foreign imports brewed in English factory towns. Others are former icons hollowed out by corporate ownership. A few have been involved in workplace scandals, safety recalls, and outright consumer deception. Together, they reveal an uncomfortable truth about the British beer market. 80% of the beer sold in this country comes from just 4 foreign-owned brewing conglomerates: Heineken, AB InBev, Molson Coors, and Carlsberg. The UK beer market generates over $35 billion annually. It supports nearly 40,000 British pubs, though that number shrinks fast. In 2024 alone, 412 pubs closed their doors, according to industry data, the highest number since 2021. Britain had around 60,800 pubs at the turn of the millennium. We've lost more than a third of them in just over 2 decades. While pubs vanish, the beers filling the taps of those that remain are increasingly controlled by a handful of multinational corporations selling carefully constructed illusions. So let's pull back the curtain on 10 brands you might want to think twice about the next time you're standing at the bar. Starting with what's been called the biggest illusion in British brewing history, Madri Excepcional. The name sounds Spanish. The branding looks Spanish. The font, the color palette, the tagline, "The Soul of Madrid," all scream authentic continental lager. There's just one problem. Madri Excepcional is about as Spanish as a chip butty. This beer was developed in Burton-on-Trent by Molson Coors, the same company that makes Carling. It's manufactured in Tadcaster, North Yorkshire. Yes, Molson Coors owns a small Spanish subsidiary brewery called La Sagra near Toledo, and they claim the beer was made in collaboration with that brewery. But the liquid in every can and every pint pulled in every British pub gets brewed right here in England. Beer expert Pete Brown put it bluntly: Madri is a completely manufactured and invented brand. It's purely a marketing reflex exercise. And Aitor de Artaza, the international managing director of Estrella Galicia, an actual Spanish beer company, told The Telegraph, "They are not very clear and not, to my point of view, very honest." Here's the part that really stings. In Madrid itself, nobody's ever heard of Madri Excepcional. The beers people actually drink there are Mahu and El Aguila. Madri has the unique distinction of being completely unknown in the city it claims to represent. Despite that, annual sales hit £93.3 million in 2023, making it the 4th most sold lager in the UK by 2024. In June of that year, the genuine Spanish beer brand Estrella launched a campaign with digital displays reading "Spanish not Spanish" and "Don't fall for fake brews." In December 2025, an application was filed with the European Union Intellectual Property Office to invalidate Madri's trademark entirely. Molson Coors defended itself by saying that brewing in the UK is more environmentally friendly than importing from the continent, which is technically true, but nobody's upset about the carbon footprint. They're upset about being lied to. Next, a beer that's been lying about where it comes from for even longer. Foster's. The lager that built its entire identity on being Australian hasn't actually been brewed in Australia since 2011. Every can of Foster's sold in the UK gets brewed in Manchester by Heineken. But the story gets even stranger when you learn that Foster's was never really Australian to begin with. It was founded in 1886 by William and Ralph Foster, 2 American brothers who moved from New York City to Melbourne. They brought with them a German-American brewer who'd trained in Cologne and an American refrigeration engineer. Within a year of launching, the Foster brothers sold the brewery for less than it cost them to build it and went back to New York. So Foster's is an American-founded British brewed lager that pretends to be Australian. Australians want nothing to do with it. Ask anyone from Sydney or Melbourne what they think of Foster's and you'll get a very direct answer, one particularly colourful Australian assessment. It tastes like piss. It's worse than Cooper's and Tooheys and Cascade. It's worse than many imported or licensed beers. British homebrewing communities aren't much kinder, with one enthusiast describing it as fizzy sweet Iron Brew orange pish with a dirty flavour. Speaking of Molson Coors, let's talk about their flagship product. Carling has been Britain's best-selling lager for more than 3 decades, and for 3 decades, beer enthusiasts have been asking why. To be fair, the beer looks fine in a glass. One beer advocate reviewer admitted it pours well with a solid cap of fairly resilient white foam. But then they took a sip. It smells bad, like fermenting bread dough and a certain kind of haphazardly managed pub. There's a fruitiness to it, but this feels entirely accidental. Other reviews are less diplomatic. By far the worst beer I've ever had. Even when I was younger, I couldn't stand this. As an adult, I'd rather drink literally anything other than this pathetic excuse for a beer. Beer writer Roger Protz, one of the most respected voices in British brewing, once wrote that the best advice Coors could put on labels of products like Foster's, Newcastle Brown and Carling would be, if you like good beer, drink something else. Carling's dominance isn't really about quality, it's about distribution, pricing, and the sheer inertia of being the default option in thousands of pubs across the country. It's the beer equivalent of choosing the first search result without thinking about it. Millions of people do exactly that every single week. Now let's move to something with a bit more heritage, but not much more flavour. John Smith's has been a staple of the British bitter market for generations. But among beer enthusiasts, it has a reputation that can be summed up in 4 words: creamy chemicals to me. That's how homebrewing forums describe the taste of John Smith's Extra Smooth, and it's hard to find anyone willing to mount a passionate defense. The brand doesn't help itself. While it also produces John Smith's Original, there's a striking lack of diversity in the lineup. Critics acknowledge it does what it sets out to do, but what it sets out to do is be profoundly unremarkable. For anyone looking for a beer with actual depth of character, John Smith's is a dead end. From one controversial bitter to another, Green King IPA is one of the most widely available cask ales in Britain, served across the company's 3,100 pubs. It's also one of the most divisive. Let's start with the name. It's called an IPA, which stands for India Pale Ale. Real IPAs are hop-forward, aromatic, and typically sit around 5 to 7% alcohol by volume. Green King IPA clocks in at 3.4%. Even Green King seems to know this is a stretch. On the barrel, it says GK IPA Bitter. On the back of the pump clip, it says Amber Ale. The ABV was recently reduced from 3.6 to 3.4% to take advantage of a lower tax bracket under UK alcohol duty regulations. One beer blog described it as the cask ale equivalent of Budweiser, brewed to be nearly flavourless, not too intoxicating and uncontroversial. A beer advocate reviewer went further. Its continued existence shames Britain. Then there are the corporate practices. Green King has earned the nickname Greedy King among beer campaigners for its aggressive acquisition strategy. The most famous incident came at the Lewis Arms pub in East Sussex, where Green King removed the popular local Harvey's Brewery beer from the taps. What followed was a 133-day boycott by regulars, a scathing article in The Guardian, and what The Independent described as a humiliating climb down when the CEO admitted the company had greatly underestimated the depth of feeling. Oh, and if you're vegan, forget it. An August 2024 company email confirmed that none of their beers can be recommended to vegans. Green King was acquired in 2019 by CK Assets, a Hong Kong-based conglomerate. Another beloved British brand owned overseas. Now for what's probably the most dramatic fall from grace in British brewing history. BrewDog was once the poster child of the craft beer revolution. Founded in 2007 by James Watt and Martin Dickey, it positioned itself as the punk alternative to corporate brewing. At its peak, the company was valued at £2 billion. It had bars across the world, a television show, and a community of equity investors it called Equity Punks. Then it all collapsed. In 2021, over 100 former employees signed an open letter accusing James Watt of fostering a culture of fear in which staff were bullied and, in their words, treated like objects. The company subsequently lost its B Corporation certification. In 2024, BrewDog announced it would hire new staff on the legal minimum wage rather than the higher voluntary living wage rate it had previously championed. The Unite union called the move outrageous. There was also the solid gold beer can promotion, where customers were told they could find a solid gold can hidden in cases. Winners discovered the cans were merely gold-plated. The Advertising Standards Authority ruled the promotion was misleading, and Watt was forced to pay out almost £500,000. James Watt stepped down as CEO in 2024. Nearly 2,000 UK pubs stopped stocking BrewDog beers altogether. In March 2026, the company's UK and Ireland operations were acquired by Tilray, an American pharmaceutical and cannabis company, for just £33 million. That's a drop from $2 billion to $33 million. 38 bars closed overnight. Nearly 500 people lost their jobs. The punk beer company didn't just lose the plot, it lost everything. Newcastle Brown Ale carries genuine historical weight. Created by Colonel Jim Porter in 1927, it was brewed in Newcastle upon Tyne for nearly 80 years. Then, in 2005, production moved to Dunstan in Tyne and Wear. In 2010, it moved again to Tadcaster in North Yorkshire. And in 2017, Heineken began producing it at their brewery in Zoeterwoude, the Netherlands. A beer called Newcastle Brown Ale, brewed in the Netherlands. The irony writes itself. But the bigger issue is quality. Long-time drinkers say the flavour has become less distinctive over the years, that it feels watered down, that the once great ale has lost much of its charm. In 2025, Heineken UK issued a safety recall for Newcastle Brown Ale 550ml bottles after reports of glass fragments being found upon opening. Glass in your beer. Next, Stella Artois, or rather the British version of Stella Artois, which is a meaningfully different product from what you'd drink on the continent. When Stella first arrived in the UK in 1976, it came in at a respectable 5.2% ABV and was considered genuinely premium. The UK version now sits at 4.6%, while the continental version remains at 5.2%. But it's not just the alcohol content. Real ale expert Simon Martin compared the two side by side, and the results were damning. The British beer is very, very skunky. That is almost intolerable. The difference in the aroma is night and day. The British Stella is a little bit overcarbonated, and then you're just left with this kind of skunky, hot-striped mess of a beer, really. You're paying premium prices for an inferior product that happens to share a name with something better. Now, two brands that tell the same sad story. Magic Rock Brewery in Huddersfield and 4 Pure Brewing in Bermondsey were both part of the early craft beer wave after 2010. Both were stocked by major supermarkets. Both had loyal followings and genuine critical acclaim. Then both were bought by Lion, an Australian brewer owned by the Japanese corporation Kirin. It didn't work. As one industry observer noted, as soon as the breweries lost their independent status, they lost the very thing that attracted drinkers to them in the first place. They became just another mass-market product, however good the beer may still have been. 4 Pure closed its Bermondsey taproom and brewing operations and moved to the Magic Rock site. Then, at the start of 2025, Magic Rock itself closed. Both brands were eventually acquired by a private equity outfit called Keystone, and the beers will now be produced at Black Sheep Brewery in Masham. The local provenance and community focus that defined these craft breweries has been completely stripped away. Finally, Cobra. This is a slightly different case. Cobra isn't guilty of deception or scandal. Its founder was born in India and saw a genuine gap in the market. A smooth beer that pairs well with curry, which the British famously love. And to its credit, Cobra does exactly that. But that's about all it does. It ranks lowly because it's quite mild in flavour and doesn't stand out on its own. This explains why it doesn't have a huge pub presence outside of Indian restaurants. It's not a bad beer exactly. It's just an unremarkable one that coasts entirely on context. Take away the poppadoms and the tikka masala, and there's not much reason to reach for it. So what's the takeaway from all of this? 10 brands, 10 stories of deception, decline, corporate mismanagement, or simple mediocrity. And underneath all of them, the same structural reality. The British beer market is increasingly controlled by a small number of multinational corporations that prioritize margin over quality and marketing over authenticity. 80% of Britain's beer comes from 4 foreign-owned brewers. The independent breweries that tried to offer an alternative have been bought up and hollowed out. The pubs where people used to discover local ales are closing at a rate of more than 1 per day. But here's the thing. Britain still has over 1,700 independent breweries, many of them members of SIBA, the Society of Independent Brewers. There are still pubs pulling pints of locally brewed cask ale and real ale that taste nothing like the mass-produced brands on this list. The beer is out there. You just have to look past the marketing, past the fake Spanish branding and the fake Australian heritage and the fake craft credentials, and find it. The next time you're at the bar, maybe skip the familiar tap handles and ask the bartender what's local. Ask about their real ale selection or independent brewery options. You might be surprised at what you find.